Hi, and welcome to Hill and Ponton's Disability Blog. I'm Natalia, Jofre, the company COO. As disability attorneys, we review thousands of medical records and countless medical claims for disabled clients. And in doing that work over the years, of course, we have unfortunately encountered that sometimes the medications or the medical devices that were intended to help our clients has inadvertently ended up hurting them. Now, of course, that is an exception, right? That is not the norm, thankfully. And so we are in no way advocating stop taking your medication or, you need to go get this medical device removed or anything. That is something that you need to discuss with your physician, what your best course of treatment is. But what this series is intending to do is basically inform you about ongoing litigation regarding some medications and some medical devices that we know can in fact be harmful, are involved in current lawsuits, the reasons why, and for you to potentially identify if any of this is applicable to you. One, so that you're heightened, right, in terms of your awareness, whether this is something that you need to look out for or monitor, or you identify with it, or if in fact you have developed a serious or significant medical condition as a result of this medication or medical device that was intended to help you and unfortunately has harmed you instead. So that is the point of this series. We're going to be doing the top 5 hot mass torts claims, if you will. Of course, there are many medications, there are many medical devices that have been unfortunately recalled or causing problems that are out there and still available in some cases. But we're going to concentrate on the top 5 right now. And so to kick that off, I want to explain to you a little bit about what a mass tort is. So just to kind of simplify things, a mass tort is defined as some act or omission that harms or injures numerous people. Okay, so just that's the scope of a general definition. So in essence, these medications or medical devices are expected to affect numerous people. And so that's where that term comes from. And you may hear that, of course, when you hear lawyers talk and other law firms regarding these types of claims. With that in mind, we're going to kick things off with a medication that we do unfortunately expect is going to affect a massive number of people. And the reason for this is that this medication has been sold for nearly 4 decades, almost 40 years, that Zantac has been used. It has been sold via prescription and also non-prescription. And before we get too far into it, what I want to tell people is that you can still have a claim even if this medication was not prescribed to you, okay? So Zantac is a heartburn medication, plain and simple. And you may remember the series of commercials that they had for Zantac commercials. The last campaign that they did that I recall was a little cartoon firefighter that come out and he'd use his hose and that would extinguish your heartburn. And, it was kind of crazy because I remember seeing the commercial one day and the next day the FDA is recalling it and is literally pulling this medication off of the shelves. And so that did happen in April of 2020, where the medication was recalled. And it was really concerning and alarming because there's a lot of people that had been taking this for years. I mean, years upon years, different generations even. I remember my dad taking it, my husband's taken it, I've taken it. This is one of the reasons that it's such a massive claim and that we expect a lot of litigation for these cases because it has spanned such a prolonged period of time. I want to also clarify that we're going to get into a lot more detail. We're going to, like I said, do a series. So there's going to be follow-up blogs dedicated to each of these medications or medical devices where we're going to get into much greater detail. But for this one particular blog, we just want to hit kind of the highlights for each of these medications or medical devices. So Zantac. What's basically wrong with it? Well, there's this chemical that is primarily used to create tumors in laboratory rats when they're doing cancer research, okay? And it's called NDMA. I'm going to give you always the simplified versions of everything. I'm not going to give you these long scientific names. But so NDMA, and it's got some other uses, but that in the medical world, that's what it's primarily used for, is to create tumors in lab rats and cancer research. So the FDA found NDMA in batches of Zantac, not just recently, but apparently now what they have found is that there was a chemical reaction with the drug ranitidine that's in Zantac when it comes into contact with water, which for the most part is always right, because you take water to drink your pills. And the chemical reaction was creating NDMA. So what you need to know is that NDMA is known to be a carcinogen, cause cancer in human beings, or at least it's believed to do that. And so what we're seeing are a lot of claims now where people that took this medication developed either bladder or stomach cancer. And those are the primary claims that are being taken for people that took Zantac. So the takeaway for Zantac is that if you took it, whether it was prescribed or not prescribed, and you developed bladder or stomach cancer, you should most certainly talk to I should encourage you to speak with an attorney and see if that is something that you potentially could have a claim for. There are other conditions correlated with Zantac use. We'll talk in our follow-up blogs about what to watch for in terms of what an excessive amount of NDMA can cause in people, like different symptoms it can give them. And it can range anywhere from like headaches to dizziness and a bunch of other things. But the takeaway for Zantac is that, or if you have any other, I would say, significant health condition and took Zantac, I would most certainly talk to someone. And at the very least, I would talk to my doctor and make sure that this isn't something that you should keep an eye on. So the next medical device, if you will, is Hernia Mesh. So Hernia Mesh is basically a material that's used to reinforce the area where a hernia is repaired. And that sounds fantastic. And the problem is that many times it shrinks, it contracts, it hardens, it moves, or it falls. As you might imagine, none of these things are good. And none of these things should happen, nor do you want them to happen when they're inside of your body. So that is the issue with many, not all, hernia meshes. There are alternatives that can be used, but I will tell you that when it comes to hernia mesh, there are many manufacturers. There are different kinds, there are different types. Some are more dangerous than others. And depending on when they were used or whether they were used and it was successful, you could potentially have a claim or not. Conditions related to hernia mesh are additional surgeries, okay? Infections, that's a biggie. Bowel obstruction, organ damage, and chronic pain. So the bottom line with hernia mesh is this. If you had hernia mesh used and you ultimately developed any of these problems or needed additional surgeries, and that's one of the biggies that we see a lot, is that, you had this very simple hernia mesh surgery and then they had to go back and do another surgery and then you developed an infection, or you had to have surgery to clean out the infection that nobody understands why you had to begin with. Those are the kinds of problems normally correlated to hernia mesh and those claims. So if you have any of those things happen and you had hernia mesh used, I would encourage you to definitely speak with an attorney to see if you have a potential claim. I want to mention, though, that, like I said, with a lot of different manufacturers and time periods and types and so on and so forth, in my experience, different attorneys handle different claims. That's how widespread this problem is. And that's how many there are. And so you may speak to one attorney that says that they can't help you. And then you could call another attorney and they say that they can, because they're specializing in different time periods, different manufacturers, different types. So if an attorney turns you down, don't be discouraged. Or, if you're offered to speak with an alternative representative, I would take them up on that offer, because like I said, a no may not mean a no. It's just that they don't handle your particular type of claim. So continuing with the overview, my top 3 medication is Valsartan. That's Valsartan. So Valsartan is the generic version of Diovan, D-O-V-A-N. And Valsartan is a blood pressure and heart medication, okay? It's used to treat high blood pressure, but it's also given to a lot of people after they've had a recent heart attack or heart failure. So those are the primary uses. Remember when we talked about NDMA, that chemical that's basically used to create tumors in lab rats when they're doing cancer research to see if they're effective? Well, unfortunately, they found NDMA in large batches of Valsartan over a certain period of time. They do know which batches they are. Luckily, some people weren't affected by this at all, but unfortunately others were. And the damages are pretty catastrophic. They're known, the people that did develop, unfortunately, conditions, developed liver, kidney, stomach, or intestinal cancer. Obviously, it doesn't need to be all of those or one or the other. Normally, if you have any one of those cancers, that is a serious and significant health condition, and you most likely have a claim. So if you developed liver, kidney, stomach, or intestinal cancer, tumors, or liver damage, I strongly encourage you to speak to an attorney, especially if you took Valsartan. And like I said, this is the generic for Diovan. And why is that important? Because sometimes people think, well, I was prescribed Diovan. But most of us, when we go to the pharmacy, we're not even asked anymore, do we want a generic? Most of us just get the generic. And it's not until we look at our pill bottles, if we even do that, that we realized what we ended up getting. So if you were prescribed a medication for high blood pressure, especially if you were prescribed a medication after a heart attack or heart failure, and you developed any of these conditions, any of those cancers or tumors or liver damage, and you're now thinking, I wonder if that's the medication I took, you should most definitely check. If you don't have the pill bottles anymore, remember that your pharmacies, they keep all of this information for years. You can go to pretty much any pharmacy, all of the major ones anyway, and ask them for your pharmaceutical history, and they're able to print that out and give it to you. Okay, so let's say you took something and you don't even remember the name of it, but you have one of these conditions. You can check it out. You can go to, your Walgreens, your Walmart, your Publix, your Tort, whatever, and ask for that pharmaceutical history. But of course, if you talk to an attorney and they think that you have a potential claim, they'll look into that as well. But if you want to narrow it down and kind of figure things out first for yourself, you can most certainly do that and see if you took Valsartan, which is what the claims are for. And by the way, you can also, and I know this from experience because I was taking something and it ended up getting recalled. Normally you're going to be contacted, but not always. It depends on how good your pharmacy is. They know which batches you took and during which time periods. So that's another little helpful hint, okay? If the batch of the medication that you took was affected, they normally know that. But once again, you don't have to get that far into it. I'm just giving you some added tidbits. If you have any of these significant cancers, tumors, or liver damage, I would just talk to an attorney. And once again, it's liver, kidney, stomach, or intestinal cancer, okay? And that's for Valsartan. Symptoms of NDMA overexposure. I'm going to go down this list really quick, but because it does affect Valsartan users, and because it can also affect Zantac users, because NDMA contamination was found in both of those, I want to just run down this list really quick. So it's headaches, fever, nausea, jaundice, vomiting, abdominal cramps, enlarged liver, dizziness, reduced function of the liver, kidneys, and lungs. All right. So if you're having any of those, keep an eye out. And then if something more develops, most certainly talk to someone. All right. On to the next. Nexium and Prilosec. I think that most people, kind of like with Zantac, will recognize those names. Those are pretty big brand names, right? Nexium and Prilosec. So these are called proton pump inhibitors. It's a fancy name that doctors like to use, or they'll say PPI for short. You'll even, if you look on attorneys' websites, they'll, talk about PPI claims or, proton pump inhibitors. This is what they're referring to. These medications are to treat GERD, okay, which is basically gastric reflux disease. And what they do is they reduce the amount of acid in a person's stomach. Of course, like I said, most people will recognize these names. These were sold over the counter. And the problem with these is that the manufacturer failed to warn that these could cause renal and kidney failure. So sometimes people are worried that their doctors are going to get sued or that their doctors are going to be affected by these claims. But you need to know that these claims, for the most part, are a separate issue, okay? Because many times, as is in this case, the claim is against the manufacturer, because not even were the medical providers being given the information to forewarn them, hey, you can prescribe this, but just know that it could cause kidney and renal failure. I mean, that's huge. You need your kidneys in order to live. Yes, you can survive on one, but it's not ideal. And if you lose both, that's really bad, right? Because then you're talking about going on a transplant list or not living at all. And by the way, to even get to the transplant point, life's pretty miserable. I mean, dialysis is horrendous. You're sick all the time. For the most part, you can't work. You end up going on disability. I mean, this is a life-changing condition. So if you took Prilosec or Nexium and ended up developing renal failure, kidney failure, you should most certainly be talking to someone. Other warnings that they've issued is that long-term use of Prilosec or Nexium can cause strokes, bone fractures, acute kidney injury, we talked about that, renal failure, we talked about that, heart damage, okay? So even if you didn't have the renal failure, but you had heart damage, that's not good. Warning signs, kidney disease, osteoporosis, all right? A lot of women get diagnosed with osteoporosis, especially after a certain age, because you assume, oh, well, this is due to menopause. But if you took this medication for a long time and then ended up developing kidney disease, or renal failure, hello, there may be a correlation there. All right. Low bone density, also known as osteopenia, kind of in that same family. Numbness in the face, legs, or arms. All right. So that's important to keep in mind. Once again, warning signs that these potential bigger problems could develop. Confusion or trouble speaking, loss of vision, dizziness, difficulty walking, severe headache, low levels of magnesium in your blood. So obviously, none of these are good. Nobody wants to have any of these issues, but they are warning signs of the bigger problem that could develop with time. And we'll get more into Nexium and Prilosec, like I said, with this entire series. But if you had kidney or renal failure, you should most certainly be speaking to someone if you took Prilosec or Nexium, especially on a regular basis. Last but not least, IVC filters. So IVC filters are used in people that are at high risk for blood clots and perhaps can't take medication for blood clots. And that happens with a lot of people that can't take the medication for one reason or another. And the purpose of this device, of the IVC filter, is to prevent blood clots from entering the heart, lungs, kidneys, or brain. So to keep blood clots out of these 4 vital organs, all right? So that sounds wonderful. And what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to catch the blood clots, and then they break down on their own over time. The problem is, well, and let me tell you what it looks like, because sometimes people don't even know what it is that they have in their bodies. Your doctor just convinces you need to have this, you have it done, and you're not really aware, but you kind of know what the idea is. So it's a spider-like wire that almost looks like a cage, and it's inserted into the inferior vena cava, which is the main vein that carries blood from the lower body to the heart. And the problem is that this IVC filter is breaking, and metal parts are then moving through the body, damaging internal organs like the lung, the heart, and causing internal bleeding. So the sad and unfortunate irony here is you have this device implanted to protect your heart, your lungs, your brain, right? And now this thing is breaking while it's in you, and it's damaging your heart, your lungs, and other internal organs, and causing internal bleeding, which, as you might imagine, is pretty devastating. So now what has been meant to solve the problem has created a worse problem. I have been told that the fail rate on these devices, IVC filters, is so high that at this point, it's almost expected to fail. That is really sad, and that is really scary, and I hate to even say that. And I will tell you that attorneys normally won't take a claim until something has actually happened, until you've actually suffered an injury as a result of taking a medication or using a defective device. But my understanding is that with IVC filters, you will be talked to, and it's a high chance that your claim will be taken even before something has happened, potentially, because it's almost as if though it's just a matter of time and they expect it to fail. So if you have one of these, I don't wish this upon you. I hope that it is effective and it works for many more years to come without a problem. But if you have any symptoms, any concerns, most certainly speak with your physician. And then if you do end up developing any of these conditions, internal bleeding, or, this unknown, heart damage, lung damage, anything of that seriousness, I strongly encourage you to speak with an attorney to see if you have a claim. So those are my top 5. I do want to make an honorable mention for Elmiron. Okay, Elmiron, it's spelled Elmiron. And this litigation has basically just started. But the reason I want to mention it just briefly, and I will be doing an entire blog on that one as well, but because the damages are so great. This medication was intended to treat bladder pain, and it has left people that used it blind, literally blindness, a series of horrific vision issues, in some cases macular degeneration. So I hope, that is not, once again, I tell people I don't wish this upon you ever, but if you took Elmiron and if you have any sort of vision issue, please look for a blog on that as well in the future. But for today, that's it. Top 5: Zantac, Hernia Mesh, Valsartan, Prilosec and Nexium, and last but not least, IVC filters. Honorable mention for Elmiron. If you have any questions, concerns, want to talk to someone about this some more, please feel free to visit our website or call our office. If you like this series, please make sure and click on the button below to subscribe. And also remember to click on the notification bell next to it so that you'll be alerted to new videos in this series. Thank you.